Dearly redheaded, we are choosing consciousness today to get through this thing called grief. Interesting word, grief. It means love, which makes for a mighty good joke. But I'm here to tell you, there's nothing else. Just joy. And if the big picture tends to bring you down, go crazy once your life goes. Woo!
First, I want to give credit to a person. His name is Karush. I don't remember his last name. His product is Voicy, Voicy. It is a voice-to-text recognition that's helping me write my book and other things. A few months ago, I had looked into where we were with voice-to-text, and I was really disappointed what I found. And I stepped away from it for a couple months, and in the last couple months, this product has really popped. You can use Voicy within something like Atticus for writers, if you're familiar. You can use Voicy within other applications. It's unbelievable, and I actually got him on a call with me to explain aspects of using Voicy so that I could maximize what I want to do with it. And one of the things Voicy also does, and I haven't gone down the rabbit hole yet, is it can edit. And it not only edits, but it can take on your vibe, the way that your words, and so it's really, really, really exciting. I was in tears talking to him because I'm so grateful for, and it's his own thing. He's not interested in, scaling it. He's scaling it himself. Has hundreds of subscribers, and he's gonna keep it for himself, which is kind of neat. So I'm very happy to help, especially me, the neurodivergence, because it's so hard sometimes when you have a brain like mine to get thoughts out, let alone when they're dissociative thoughts. So I love to write, but for Laugh So I Don't Die, I need a bigger gun. So, how are you?
Great.
All right.
Always good.
Yesterday I shared a post and a subsequent conversation, over fucking Facebook, with one of my subscribers, listeners, that I felt was really very helpful to others. And then, then I found the person that can take what I'm thinking and just, it's like taking a lump of clay, and this person can create, I was going to say a metronome. What she can do with what I can synthesize, well, this person just can just maybe put it in a more left brain way. I often feel like I do a decent job, but I'd rather be standing up talking to people. The way this woman writes is just extraordinary, and she told me she was autistic. I really think, and I've explained why I think autistics are the ones that are going to further us along in psychology and neurology, because we need to get to the root. Her Facebook page is Scapegoated, Awareness, Advocacy, and Healing. So if you can appreciate what I wrote yesterday and trying to acknowledge that there's a lot of self involved in facing yourself and facing your trauma. So this woman does not have children, but she was scapegoated. And I don't say enough about scapegoating. And let me just make that note to myself, because we can do the next episode totally on scapegoating. But I want to relate this episode to the last episode. So what I was saying or attempting to say is the responsibility to self for getting through shit. And this woman doesn't have children, but she faced herself through extreme scapegoating abuse. And I've explained it before. I'll explain it again in the next episode, but hear me. I'm trying to relate more towards the last episode and what I wrote. And this came out of left field. But again, Brian, I'm trying here. I'm trying to show that if you're facing narcissism, if you're facing estrangement, there's the self component in all this. So the scapegoated awareness advocacy and healing person, woman, I don't know her name. I'm 99% sure she's female. She was responding to somebody who had written to her about estrangement. Now, I'm going to relate it to self, and I'm going to relate it to yesterday, but give me an opportunity. Her response to somebody was, and this is now estrangement. I'll make the connection after I get this fucking story out. Framing no contact as obstruction is unfair and reflects a lack of empathy for the impact your behavior had on your child. It is very rare that a child is estranged from a parent for no valid reason. And she was interacting with somebody else. And I come in and I say, it's just not true. I am pro-child too, but I can't compete with the influences of my siblings and ex-husband, etc. I was scapegoated by siblings and married a very disordered man and didn't figure it out until my kids were teens. When I woke up to my dissociation, I had already indoctrinated my kids in with my abusers. So when I separated from the abuse, I looked like the problem. Covert psychological abuse from antisocial types is finally being recognized in the cycle of abuse. My apologies have been numerous, but the other side is more compelling. And this is single-handedly one of the best things I've ever seen written. And as I said, I can synthesize, but then, she took this clay and she made the friggin', all right, here we go. And ironically, she brings up repetition compulsion is real. So where my intuition is concerned, that had been brought up to me twice within 24 hours, which is interesting. Many people do not consciously recognize psychological abuse or unconscious conditioning until later in life, especially when those dynamics were normalized in childhood or reinforced through intimate relationships. That lack of awareness does not mean there was malice. It means the harm was hidden, internalized, and difficult to name. And two things can exist at the same time. You can be a survivor of abuse, and you can still be responsible as a parent for the impact of your children experienced, whether or not that impact was intended. Okay, that right there, what my brain did with that is I read it that way, and then I read it this way. And two things can exist at the same time. You can be a survivor of abuse, and you can still be responsible as a person, she said parent, for the impact of your children, for the impact of you, what you experienced, whether or not the impact was intended. So I hope this makes sense. She was taking it to the next level when it comes to how this cycle repeats. I was adopting what she said and making it bigger. The responsibility rests with the parent. The responsibility rests with self. It is not a child's role to understand, contextualize, or emotionally carry a parent's trauma to self, in order to validate their own pain. Children may later develop empathy, but empathy does not negate impact, and it does not absolve responsibility. Same for self. This is the most complex and painful part of healing from psychological abuse, holding accountability without collapsing into shame or defensiveness, and acknowledging that harm can occur even when someone was doing the best they could with the awareness they had at the time. I hope that makes the impact I want it to. It's the way to look at estrangement, the way to look at narcissism, and what we tolerate as self. My response to her: I absolutely agree. This explanation addresses the bigger picture. However, I have had little contact with my sons due to the influence of others, not what I repeated. What I repeated, and I'm sorry for, is my problem, so to speak. They are angry for me isolating and not wanting to discuss my abusers, etc. How does one apologize for tolerating, enabling, fawning when that would still be my kids' preference towards my abusers? What I know I repeated isn't what they are looking for. Parental alienation plays a role in a lot of this. I think what you wrote is true and compelling, but fails to acknowledge what some kids are furious about their parents waking up late to what would keep the peace if they didn't wake up. Antisocial covert abusers can and do treat others with grace to scapegoat the truth teller. Now, I stand behind what I wrote, but I also want to say that I have totally been open to what my kids bring to me that encapsulate their experiences that I need to apologize for and listen to, which is slightly different from what I wrote, because what I wrote was in an effort to help this woman understand, being childless, how this cycle goes on. Then she wrote some things that she subsequently took out, so I didn't want to, she acknowledged she was autistic, which I don't think is a problem, but she took some things out that I let go. My response to her after those things was, autistic here as well. We get this stuff. Deep brain reorienting is available for CPTSD sufferers that have plateaued. I invited her on to speak here. She really does not want to do that. It's not something she's comfortable with. She, again, her site, Facebook site, is Scapegoated Awareness, Advocacy, and Healing. I told her I woke up to sibling scapegoating in my 40s, then the extent of my sociopathic ex by the time I was 50, and sons were already bonded with my siblings, my ex, and my ex's family. It's been heartbreaking. So now she sort of gets where I'm coming from. And again, I think this exchange was beautiful because I didn't get angry and defensive, nor did she. And I notice the way she interacts with people is consistently seeing both sides. She does such a good job of it. She says, I'm truly sorry for what you've been through and how it continues to impact your life. It is heartbreaking. I didn't have children, but wanted them, but was afraid to because I was the family scapegoat. And I was the linchpin like you and my family. And when I woke up and decided to heal, the whole family ganged up against me, and I lost my nieces and nephews that were like my children. Nobody talks enough about the heartbreak that you go through while you're ending the cycle, and the people who are supposed to love you act like they hate you. And that, again, that's why the cycle ends for self. It continues to repeat outside of self, or can. I said, I'm sorry for you too. I was told I would lose my nieces and nephews and found this way to laugh right in the main few abusers' faces. I knew they were ridiculous, and of course inspired them to take my kids. I joke, but it's true. There are 65 people, that's my number, between family and in-laws waiting for me to disappear by looking crazy or dying simply because I woke up. I told her about my book. I compliment her on her insight and ability to know this stuff beyond what having kids would have illustrated. And I say empathy is directly tied to what we have survived and is a mirror as well to the dark parts of self. I think your people with extreme empathy have that extreme levels of toleration, and we call it empathy to ease the pain of others more often than for ourselves. So I hope that translates. Yeah, she's I mean that energy is like mind-boggling. I wish I could do that, but I'm not here to do that. She's here to do that. I'm here to do whatever the fuck I'm doing. Scapegoating. So I'm assuming we're about 15 minutes in?
Almost exactly. We're coming up on 16.
So her premise for starting that page, again, Scapegoated Awareness, Advocacy, and Healing, was this page speaks from the context of abuse, meaning that we are supporting those who have been scapegoated. This is a survivor-centric space. Everything shared here is spoken from the lived experience of the person who was scapegoated, not the abuser, not the enabler, not the family, not the outsider who wants to debate it or a culture that denies. Though everything that is shared may not apply to you, we are all at different stages and we have different outcomes. We do 4 things here. We validate what survivors have endured. The full, layered, lived reality of being scapegoated and how survivors are impacted. We validate the lack of support, acknowledgement, and understanding supervisors experienced from family, community, society, and culture. We educate, empower, and hold space for survivors to reclaim themselves, their identity, voice, boundaries, truth, and sovereignty. This is another word that fucking gets me. Sovereignty outside the scapegoat role. We address the systemic nature of scapegoating and the culture that scapegoats. We address the systemic nature of scapegoating and the culture that scapegoats, period. The family reenacts cultural institutional patterns rooted in, and this is where, if you didn't know she was autistic before, now you fucking know. Rooted in colonialism. Is that the way you say that? Colonialism?
Colonialism?
White supremacy.
That's what it says there.
I know, but I'm thinking of colonization. Well, that's probably
But
on the list.
if the next word is white supremacy, I'm guessing it's colonialism. That's a really hot buzzword. Right?
Yeah. Patriarchy, misogyny. By the way, patriarchy, I have no issue with what it should mean. It's kind of like capitalism that's not conscious. It's like patriarchy that's not conscious. Matriarchy would just be elevating our care for children and parents. So I understand patriarchy gone awry is the problem, like capitalism gone awry. And I know where this person is coming from, but it does not reflect. I would want to have a bigger discussion. Misogyny, racism, religious authoritarianism, social hierarchies. So we speak about superiority, projection, erasure, dominance, condescension, blame shifting, narcissistic behavior, gaslighting, ego deflection, shame projections, denial, generational trauma, emotional immaturity, enmeshment. We are speaking about the people and systems that scapegoat. The space is for the scapegoated, the ones who are targeted, shamed, bullied, and even erased. We will continue to speak to the insidious nature of being scapegoated and the systemic origins. So yeah, I mean, this is she's all that in a bag of chips. And I don't think I've done a good enough job talking about scapegoating, which impacts so very many. She wrote a poem, I guess I'd say, about what it feels like to be scapegoated. And I also want to read that. Being scapegoated means we are saddled with the burden of being an anchor. An anchor has a purpose. It stabilizes a boat by absorbing force. It holds everything steady, especially when conditions are unstable. In families and in society, scapegoated people are assigned this role. Blame, tension, conflict, fear, responsibility, and consequences are placed onto us so others do not have to carry them. As long as we hold the weight, the boat remains upright. We notice what others avoid. We feel deeply. We tell the truth and expect honesty. We do not easily conform to denial. Those qualities are used to hold what others refuse to face. Like an anchor, this work happens below the surface, unseen and under constant strain. When we refuse to keep carrying the weight, the boat often capsizes. The instability that was being held down rises all at once. The blame does not shift. It snaps back into the same person who was carrying it all along. We are held responsible for the collapse, punished for stepping out of position, and pressured to return so the weight can be contained again. Not because we caused the harm, but because everything was built on us holding it. No person should be required to absorb blame, responsibility, or damage so others can avoid accountability, change, or truth. We are allowed to relieve ourselves of these burdens, and the impact of doing so belongs to those who place the weight on us and never learned to anchor themselves. Yeah. There you go. I know I have more time, so I'm going to go to my buddy Pete Walker, who wrote the Bible on CPTSD, and what he has to say about scapegoating. This book made it through my incident. God knows where they found it. Probably out by the pool. Anyway, I can make fun of having a rage event. It's getting easier, quite frankly. So I thought I had the pages marked. Oh, well, maybe this came up. I know I have brought up. But here's two lines that saved me tremendous grief. Walker was talking about forgiveness and what's hardest to forgive after talking to so many people who had gone through extensive trauma. And again, on forgiveness. In this vein, it is crucial to understand that certain types of abuse are so extreme and damaging to the victim that forgiveness is simply not an option. Examples of this include sociopathy, sociopathy, conscious cruelty, many forms of scapegoating, and parental incest. Scapegoating. His definition is an outer critic process whereby personal frustration is unfairly dumped onto others. Scapegoating is typically fueled by unworked through anger about childhood abandonment. Displacing anger on the wrong target, however, fails to release or resolve old or related hurts. This speaks to the cycle, and I feel I was remiss in not talking about it more in the cycle because it's so apropos. Scapegoating is often a reenactment of a person's parent's abusive role. Put in sibling, put in whatever word applies. I think parents are really bearing the brunt of this cycle of abuse right now. We've talked about it. We've talked about estrangement. I can remember years ago, my therapist would say mothers and daughters were the bread and butter of psychology. Now the bread and butter of psychology is parents and children. So mothers, fathers, and their children, and beyond. I mean, I am not likely to enter into therapy because of a sibling, but it certainly speaks to how these cycles continue. Oh, I know what I want to talk about. Fuck. Hold on. I'm coming back. I swear to Buddha.
We're at 25 minutes, too.
All right. So scapegoating is often a reenactment of the parent's abusive role. It is blind imitation of a parent who habitually released their frustration by indiscriminately raging. And this speaks to the cycle repeating on emotional, psychological abuse. There may be no hitting or physical abuse, sexual abuse, but this insidious undercurrent of rage. When a fight-type parent, etc., scapegoats those around them, he or she reinforces a pervasive kind of mirroring. He is making sure that when he feels bad, so does everyone else. It's like a bumper sticker I saw the other day: if mama ain't happy, nobody happy. I witnessed this common example of scapegoating several times in my childhood. My parents hated anybody who was late. If one of us children were even a minute late for something, they felt absolutely justified in blasting us with their righteous indignation. It was true even though we all learned very quickly to be anally punctual. Because of their untreated CPTSD, however, their anger was the tip of the iceberg of their unexpressed rage about their own childhood hurts. In this case, they were flashing back to the pain of their parents' chronic lateness and failure to show up to meet their normal childhood needs. I hope that resonates with who it needs to. He then, and I also think I've read this before, talked about the scapegoat type, dissociative type. He goes beyond fight or flight, discusses fawn and freeze. The fawn freeze is typically, the scapegoat is the most codependently entrenched subtype. Not all scapegoats are fawn freeze, but since fawn and freeze types are both prone to extreme self-denial, may not end up in the scapegoat position. I often think that, like in the sibling picture, that's probably very often the youngest. I was the much youngest. Just saying. This is also because these are the two most passive of the four Fs, meaning fight and flight are stronger. They've both typically suffered the most punishment or rejection for asserting themselves in the toddler stage. When the fawn freeze is not able to escape the scapegoat role in childhood, she is then set up to be similarly victimized in adulthood. He flips between he and she. He does do that equally. I try to say they. In worst case scenarios, fawn freezes are easily recognized by fight types who take them captive. They may then turn them into doormats and subject them to domestic violence. Sometimes the fawn freeze does not even recognize that they are being abused. Other times they blame themselves, as they had to do in childhood. We know from studying the domestic violence cycle, many narcissistic abusers know when and how to shower romantic tidbits on their victims just when they are at the point of leaving. These narcissists are often the charming bullies described in the last chapter. Their infrequent tidbits have more warmth in them than anything the codependent received at home, so she quickly becomes rehooked, and just as quickly the cycle of abuse begins again. Ding, 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 we have a winner. It is important to note that many charming bullies also offer copious tidbits briefly in the courtship stage, but these peter out to near starvation rations once the entrapment is complete. And again, I think this borders on that traditional narcissism with leaning towards socio and psychopathic behaviors. Appreciate that this book is probably at least a decade old. I don't know when it came out, but it's still my Bible, but it's not the latest and greatest. I am trying to tell you quickly when it came out. Copyright 2014. Many fawn freeze types only make token efforts at recovery if they do not avoid it altogether. Often fawn freezes were forced to so thoroughly abandon their protective instincts that they become trapped in what psychologists call learned helplessness. I think that's why all of a sudden we have so many people waking up to this, men and women. Finally, there's a growing evidence that a significant number of men also silently suffer domestic violence. I have worked a great deal with these fawn freeze types in my years of doing telephone crisis counseling. Hope for them lies in understanding how their childhood abuse set them up for their current abuse. This is often difficult because scapegoated fawn freezes were often punished extra intensely for complaining. Numerous times I have heard domestic violence victims say, "But I don't want to act like a victim." Usually I then try to help them see how much they were truly victims in childhood. However, if I cannot get them to see this, they usually are not able to rescue themselves from their current victimization. It is really, really, really challenging to break out of this. I can remember sitting with my long-term psychologist. So I say long-term, we had a long-term relationship. I don't mean I was in there every week talking about that stuff. That is very, very far from the truth. I would kind of go and get doses, and he made it very clear to me that he wanted me to stop drinking and meditate and do things to help myself that I was unwilling to do or unable to do, better word, there we go, unable to do until I finally could. But I can remember sitting there and saying, I'm not a narcissist, right? I'm not a martyr, right? I'm just autistic. I just have CPTSD. I remember all that. And, yeah, I can see Brian out of my peripheral vision.
We're there.
We are there. So it's a good place to end. Mm-hmm. So I hope I did justice. This scapegoating thing is such a huge part of childhood trauma. Such a huge part of trauma that then follows you into your families, into your marriages, and gets embedded in an insidious way in what happens with our children. I had the same psychologist, and it's weird because I still haven't talked to, today I might get there. The therapist that I did the podcast with in 2023, I'm not going to say his name here. If you're interested, go and listen to it. That's the same therapist that a year later decided I had crossed over to bipolar. He had told me that one of my children was pathologizing me. The other one had started to abuse me. And then when I had my warranted rage event, it was, oh, no. Now you are all those things that for prior years, and I knew him 17 years, all of a sudden everything we had talked about over the 17 years after one PTSD rage incident had put me in a different realm. It was devastating. It was a type of betrayal, scapegoating, betrayal by a psychologist. Ain't that fun?
Thank you for listening and supporting Natural Born Redhead. If you follow the bouncing balls, please like and subscribe. If you know someone interested in sparing others grief and inciting joy, message me on Facebook or reach out via my website, Natural Born Redhead. J-Ma.